For a brief moment, it looked as though something impossible might actually happen. A royal door that had been firmly closed for years suddenly appeared to crack open. Then, almost as quickly as that possibility emerged, it disappeared. So what changed within the space of a few hours? Why were two completely different versions of the same story suddenly circulating? And could this latest episode quietly mark the moment when hopes of reconciliation between Prince Harry and the royal family finally began slipping out of reach? Because this wasn't simply another disagreement over travel plans. It became something much bigger. For years, nearly every visit Prince Harry has made to Britain has followed a familiar pattern. Rumours build, anonymous sources begin speaking, reports point one direction before another account pulls the story somewhere else. By the time Harry actually arrives, the headlines are often focused less on why he's there, and more on the latest chapter in the ongoing divide between him and the institution he left behind. This time felt no different. At first, reports suggested there had been a significant breakthrough. Just hours before Harry was due to arrive in Britain, it was reported that the Duke of Sussex had accepted an invitation to stay at Buckingham Palace during his visit. On the surface, that sounded remarkable. After years of public disagreements, interviews, memoirs, legal disputes over security, and repeated questions about whether father and son could ever rebuild their relationship, staying inside the king's official residence would inevitably be interpreted as more than simple accommodation. It would symbolize trust, or at least the beginning of it. Except that wasn't where the story ended. Within minutes, another version emerged. Royal sources reportedly pushed back against the earlier claims, saying Harry had not formally accepted the invitation within the required timeframe, and that the offer was therefore no longer available. Suddenly, what looked like a hopeful gesture transformed into another confusing exchange of claims and counterclaims. And that raised an uncomfortable question. How could two dramatically different accounts appear almost simultaneously? Was this simply a misunderstanding? Or was something else happening behind the scenes? That's where commentators began offering very different interpretations. Some royal observers argued this was nothing more than poor communication between both camps. Others believed the timing looked too convenient to be accidental. And then came perhaps the most controversial suggestion of all. According to commentary in the Daily Mail, some questioned whether Harry's camp may have hoped that public reports of a palace stay would create enough pressure for the invitation to become unavoidable. Another possibility raised by commentators was that the public disagreement itself reflected how badly communication between both sides has deteriorated. None of those explanations have been confirmed. But the fact that so many different theories appeared almost instantly tells its own story. Confidence between both sides appears increasingly fragile. Even routine travel arrangements now become national headlines. And that may be the most revealing detail of all. Because this wasn't happening in isolation. Harry's relationship with Britain has already been overshadowed by his long-running dispute over taxpayer-funded security. His legal challenges and public comments have repeatedly kept tensions alive, while interviews, documentaries, and his memoir have left lasting scars across the family's public image. Every new visit now arrives carrying years of unresolved history, which makes even small logistical decisions seem politically significant. Then another perspective entered the conversation. The Telegraph's royal editor, Hannah Furness, argued that King Charles may finally have decided enough is enough. For years, critics have sometimes described the king as overly patient with his younger son. Yet this latest episode was interpreted by some commentators as evidence that a clear line had finally been drawn. The message, they suggested, was simple. Buckingham Palace isn't something that can be booked at the last minute. Whether viewers agree with that interpretation or not, it reflects how dramatically the conversation has shifted. Not long ago, discussions centered around reconciliation. Now they increasingly focus on boundaries. And that shift changes everything. Because once public expectations move from forgiveness toward finality, rebuilding relationships becomes far more difficult. But there was another twist hiding underneath all of this. The argument wasn't really about bedrooms inside Buckingham Palace. It was about control. For years, Prince Harry has spoken openly about wanting to tell his own story. From television interviews to best-selling books, he has consistently argued that his perspective deserved to be heard after years inside the royal system. Yet critics argue that despite all those efforts, he continues finding himself reacting to events rather than shaping them. The Express suggested this latest episode demonstrated exactly that. According to its analysis, Harry has spent years trying to control his narrative, yet the institution continues operating largely unaffected by his criticisms. Whether fair or unfair, that perception has become increasingly influential among royal commentators. And perhaps that's why this latest dispute attracted so much attention despite revolving around something as ordinary as accommodation. It became symbolic. One side appeared determined to project stability. The other once again found itself surrounded by competing headlines. Meanwhile, the palace itself remained largely consistent with a strategy that's been associated with the monarchy for decades. Respond sparingly. Reveal little. Allow events to speak for themselves. It's an approach famously associated with Queen Elizabeth II's well-known principle of never complain, never explain. Compared with today's endless cycle of briefings, counter-briefings, anonymous sources and social media speculation, that older philosophy feels almost unrecognizable. And perhaps that's why this latest chapter has struck such a nerve. Not because of where Prince Harry might spend the night, but because every disagreement now seems to reinforce the same uncomfortable reality. Even the smallest interactions between father and son immediately become public battles over perception. For those hoping reconciliation remained just around the corner, this latest episode has left fresh doubts. Not because anyone officially declared the relationship beyond repair. No one has done that. But because trust, if it is ever to return, usually grows quietly. It rarely begins with conflicting headlines appearing minutes apart. So as Harry's latest UK visit fades from the front pages, one question continues hanging over the House of Windsor. Has this become simply another temporary misunderstanding in a relationship filled with them? Or are we watching the moment when even the possibility of reconciliation starts becoming harder to imagine than the conflict itself?